Hi everyone, and now for your marine forecast for Alaska, issued on August 17th, 2023, and with the outlook for the next couple of days. So let's get started first with the ice edge. What we got going here is a last little remnants of some ice up by Wainwright. And with the wind fetch that we've got going, it's going to go in and out. But the main story here is that the ice is getting pretty rotten up in there. And we're approaching our seasonal minimum with a long fetch of winds after each one of these fronts. That ice is just getting more and more rotten. So for tonight's weather, we've got a cold front that's moved onshore. It's about down through Utqiagvik, hanging up a little bit on the Brooks Range and down through the Norton Sound. We also have a little bit of a developer that has the remnants of Hurricane Dora as far as tropical moisture goes, but it's not a very strong low, about 1,016 or so, and it's it's just about southeast of Dutch Harbor there. And then for Friday's weather, that system moves a little bit to the northeast, deepens ever so slightly, only 2 millibars. Again, tight, occluded front around it with a little bit of wind, but not a whole lot going on there. Brand new cold front moving on to the northwest coast, stretching almost down to the Bering Strait. And then we also have a 994 millibar low out in the Bering Sea, and that guy is the remnants of Typhoon Lan, and there's some tropical moisture and some pretty good energy in it at 994, and you can see a lot of westerly fetch that's aimed at about Norton Sound down to the Yukon Delta area. And then for Saturday, that system sorts of splits off in two and weakens a little bit. But again, a long fetch for some southwesterly swells in that system. And that'll be moving across the Bering Sea, tapering off as it gets up to Norton Sound or so. But what we do have is some high water predicted due to the new moon and also that push of water there. Also, we have the low that with a little bit of tropical moisture in it, 1,013 out in the center of the Gulf, full occluded front, precipitation around that, and a weak trough over the northern interior down into the Alcan area. So, Friday's marine forecast for southeast Alaska. Northwesterlies on the inside, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet. And also northwesterlies on the outside, 5 knots around Cape Suckling, but otherwise 10 to up to 20 knots with seas up to 7 feet and with those westerlies. And then for Saturday, what we've got is variable wind directions in the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet, and about 15 knots all across the board on the outside waters, and seas up to 6 feet. Some of that is a southwest swell. For south central, we've got a lot of variable winds in the east, around 10 knots or so, seas up to 5 feet. And then as you get down off the Kenai Peninsula, 20 to 25 knots with some outflow through Kennedy Entrance, about 25 knots there, seas up to 6 feet. And then in Cook Inlet, we're expecting southwesterlies with the seas up to about 3 feet, 10 to 20 knots. Then for Saturday's marine forecast, all that wind backs off in the Cook Inlet area, about 10 knots, seas about 3 feet or so. And then we start picking up easterlies on the outside waters, about 15 knots, seas up to as much as 4 feet, only 10 knots in Prince William Sound. We get down to the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on the Gulf side. We've got wind ranging from 15 to 25 knots. Got some split directions there, but seas up to 5 feet, particularly in Chillicothe Strait. And then on the Bering Sea side, 10 to 20 knots. Seas only 2 feet with not much fetch. And then for Saturday's marine forecast, things start to have a little bit of a westerly there direction. On the Gulf side, 10 to 20 knots, seas up to 5 feet, 3 feet in Chillicothe Strait, 3 feet down by False Pass or so. On the Bering Sea side, so we start ramping it up about 15 to 20 knots and seas up to 4 feet. Then for the Aleutian chain on Friday, a lot of variable wind directions, but some of them have a good westerly component in it. As you can see in that far western Aleutians, it's a good southwest, and that's that fetch I was talking about. Winds seas up to 6 feet out there in the west, and then up to around 5 feet as you get further east in the Aleutians and up to Unalaska. And then for Saturday's marine forecast, now we see those southerlies with those systems splitting up in the western Bering Sea. Got a good 40 knots of wind, and then it starts to taper off 30 to 25 knots as you get further east. Then finally, only fairly light winds in the eastern Aleutians, around 10 knots and seas 3 feet. But notice that 17-foot sea out by Shemya. And then for the west coast on Friday, we've got 15 knots to the further south you get, and seas only are up to around 4 feet or so. But notice those southwesterlies starting to ramp up 20 to 25 knots, seas up to 7 feet down by St. Matthew Island, otherwise about 5 feet or so going into Norton Sound. Saturday ramps up 25 knots across the board in the western sections and 20 knots in the eastern sections, including the Pribilofs. Seas up to 8 feet down by St. Matthew. Wouldn't be surprised to see some of that swell actually rolling up toward the Bering Strait, and then seas 4 feet down by the Pribilofs. And then here's that special weather statement that got issued for the west coast of Alaska by the Fairbanks office. Waves washing pretty high up the beach, so now might be the time to move anything off the beach that you're thinking about. Minor erosion possible and gusty winds. And then for the Arctic coast on Friday, as you get down toward the Bering Strait, 15 to 20 knots, but really ramps up with a series of cold fronts up on the Chukchi Sea. Southwesterlies there, 25 to 30 knots, and seas up to 6 feet in those ice-free waters. And then some variable wind directions as you get around to the Beaufort Sea, 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 5 feet. And then for Saturday's marine forecast, again in the Beaufort Sea, the wind really backs off. Still got a little bit of westerly component, 10 to 15 knots or so, seas up to 5 feet in ice-free waters. But then as you get down toward the Bering Strait, start seeing those winds ramp up to 20 knots and seas up to 6 feet. A lot of that's going to be a southwest swell. So that's it for the marine forecast. I want you all to file a float plan out there. Let somebody know where you're going to be out there on the big water, and please stay safe.